With Delta Vacations, you can travel to your favorite vacation destinations throughout the U.S., Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. You'll save when you purchase air and hotel together and earn up to 7,500 bonus miles, in addition to credited flight miles with the Sky Miles program. For reservations and information, visit deltavacations.com or contact a travel agent.
Good morning, everyone. This morning we are with Simon Lycett, and he is actually doing the flowers for the Queen's dinner on Thursday evening prior to the wedding. We are here in his studio today to talk to him about doing large impact pieces, what we call impact pieces, but here they call them platform pieces?
Pedestals. Pedestal arrangements, group arrangements, yeah.
And what is kind of the trends when it comes to that now? Is it more people want them, or?
A lot of people want them. A lot of our weddings take place in big empty spaces, so you need to add volume, and lots of clients will say to me, how is it best to spend my flower budget? And I always say it's better to do two real statements than lots of itty-bitty things everywhere,
right.
So that when people walk in, they're seen. Most weddings take place with everybody standing, so within a room of standing guests, if it's way up or high, you're still going to be able to see it gets loads of impact. And it's also very easy to get a wow factor from doing one massive decoration. So if you're really struggling budget-wise, I would say do one huge statement, put all your money, all your flowers into that, make it spectacular, and the job is sort of done, because everybody will remember that for ages.
Right. So when you have the large impact pieces, do you repurpose them? Do you reuse them for the receptions at all, or?
It's a question that lots of clients ask, and we are very, very reluctant to do it. I would rather shave a bit of money off there and then pay to do a couple of different arrangements at the reception venue. Nothing looks great because you're doing this gorgeous arrangement that you create on site, right, in situ, and then either before your guests have all left, or the moment they've all gone, you then have to drag it out of that place, stuff it in a van, transport it across London in all the ghastly traffic, and then either just as your guests are arriving or just after they've arrived, you then have to drag it out of the van through probably 3 sets of fire doors, in a lift, up to the 8th floor, and then they get photographed next to it, and it looks horrible. So actually, don't bother. No is the answer. So I give them that story, and then it normally
takes care of it, huh?
Yeah.
So what are the trends now for bridal bouquets in the UK?
Lots of soft, looser styles. I'm so over that dome of roses, the tight, moundy thing, which I'm sorry, I have to blame on America as an influence to us.
Is that Martha Stewart?
I think she started it, yeah, and then all those lovely American celebrity weddings where it's another dome of roses with gorgeous gardenias, which we can't get here. You know, it's a dome of hydrangea with phalaenopsis or something, and so I'm always nervous of giving brides tied bunches with natural stems because I think it's going to mark the dress. So most bouquets that we do are on a wired stem, which makes our lives hell because it takes twice as long, it costs twice as much money, but they look very beautiful, nice slender stem, gorgeous, easy and comfortable to carry. They don't have to balance like we used to be told when we were learning, making them at college, but as long as they hold together for the 8 hours, that's fine.
Are there some kind of traditions that people use in the UK, brides use in the UK, for their bouquet? Are there certain family flowers? Is there specific things other than that they just like a specific color or flower?
There's very few coloured flowers in bridal bouquets. We have a little bit of the sort of soft sorbet sherbety colours that have been introduced in those sort of antique pinks and lattes. We're getting a little bit of that. But on the whole, most bouquets tend to be just ivory, whitey, cream shades, which I think works photographically. If you put too strong a colour against a sea of ivory white bride and dress and bridesmaids and things, it can be quite a strong colour. Right. And my heart always sinks if a bride turns up with a little swatch of turquoise or some colour that doesn't exist florally, because I can't fall back on feathers as a colour option. So I always, you know, things like, it's nice to do some berries, some foliage, interesting different foliages, lots of fragrant herbs. Yes, yeah, we use loads of herbs in our work because so many of the flowers are bred for size, colour and vase life, and something's got to give, and it's normally the fragrance.
Sure.
So we have gorgeous garden roses that smell lovely during the summer months, but then we can use things like herbs, mint, rosemary, thyme, sage, all those things look so beautiful and pretty, and also add a little fragrance.
Love that. Are there flowers, it sounds like there's flowers that are probably not available here that we might be familiar with in the States. Can you think of a few?
Loads and loads. You get fabulous gardenias, amazing cut gardenias, which we really struggle to get. I have to buy trays of plants and nurture them to get them open. Well, imagine. It's a nightmare. You know, you need 50 and there's 19 coming. And you think, oh, that's really hard. We get much better foliage than you guys, but you do well on flowers. Things like water lilies, all those beautiful open... We really struggle on things like that. I mean, I had to do a film or television commercial once, and in the end I was buying them from Kew Botanical Gardens at some fortune each, and then sitting dripping wax to hold them open so that they stayed perfect. But you have those incredibly large, beautiful, lush roses all the time. And your hydrangea is very fulsome and beautiful. You get all that wonderful Colombian hydrangea, which we get a little bit of, but I assume you get quite a few more flowers from there because you get those lovely, big, lush, gorgeous, fat, cabbagey roses and things.
Yeah.
Right. What about the flowers for Thursday night? Now, I know you can't talk a lot about that.
Seasonal loveliness, I think, is all I'm daring
Is that how you say?
Yeah. But I would advise anyone that's getting married having a party this time of the year. The brilliant thing about Britain that I think is you don't have in the States is we have real seasonality to our flowers. So we're able to look at a decoration and tell what time of the year it was made. Obviously we can buy peonies in January and tulips in August, and I'm always really saddened if a bride comes to me and wants something so way out of season, because I think it's nice to look at your wedding photos 20, 30 years hence and be able to remember, oh yeah, I did get married in April, I carried April flowers.
Right.
And we have beautiful, I mean this time of the year, late April, early May, and you will have experienced our amazing weather that we suddenly have had. And then yesterday it was actually bloody cold. But it has been hot and gorgeous, so our blossom has been out nearly over, our lilac is out and is gorgeous.
So fragrant.
And so many of our spring flowers are virtually over now, but normally the sort of end of April, early May is when we get that lovely crossover period. So we've got narcissi, hyacinths, tulips, but we've got lilac, blossom, Solomon's seal, sweet peas. The English sweet peas are just starting and they smell to die for.
See, I think that's so very different because in the United States, a lot of the brides like the cymbidium orchids, which kind of drives us crazy because we see a lot of it all the time.
Yes.
And they will have that all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what season. So I think it's very interesting that you focus on the different seasons.
Yes.
And when you really look at it and what's going on for this coming Friday and what we've been hearing, that is going to be very beautiful because it is part of the season that we're in.
Yeah, I think as a whole, it's one of the characteristics of British flowers is that we are always very seasonally led. We struggle to get the range of flowers imported that you guys have, and I think for that reason we've always had to make the most of our seasonal things. And there's also a really big push with food and with flowers and fruit and veg and all the things at the moment to eat seasonally, to buy seasonally, and also to buy locally. Right. So if I'm using, but it's quite interesting, if I'm using flowers and foliage that I brought down from the north of Scotland, they've actually travelled further miles than if I bring them over from the flower market in Holland. So we do have to be careful, and there's a lot of this people wanting to have green things and using things from Britain, but actually we don't have that much. So during out of season, to bring it over from Holland, it's travelled less distance.
Interesting.
But we have much better foliage than you guys ever have. I can remember a couple of times working in America, and also you can't get stuff from one state to the other. So things like wheat can't be transported in case we suddenly infect some wheat bowl country state. So therefore I wanted green wheat in huge quantities, not allowed. No, so we're lucky in as far as we can get all our foliages and things and bring them all around.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, we have lovely, lovely foliage. Especially this time of the year, you've seen the trees are all those beautiful different shades of green. I mean, I always think the end of April, beginning of May, every tree is a slightly different shade of green, and I just love that citrusy sort of strong green with the dark and then the glossy. So it's perfect for us for foliage at this time of the year.
What are you seeing for boutonnieres for the men? England is very traditional rose.
And the carnation.
And the carnation?
Nothing wrong with a carnation.
I know.
A bit snobby about carnations, but a lovely carnation for a gentleman is beautiful.
Right. Now, that's one of the Queen's favourite flowers, I understand.
Yeah, I think carnations, roses, They're all classic, they look beautiful. I mean, you guys can have gardenias quite often for a buttonhole, which we love to do, but again, it's a nightmare to do. And then they only need to put their seatbelt across it in the car, and it's wrecked, and I want to kill them. Lily of the Valley, a few little stems of Lily of the Valley, especially this time of the year, is beautiful and smells gorgeous. And we do quite a lot of weddings where the groom might wear a phalaenopsis, a white phalaenopsis, which I think looks great on a dinner suit. So a lot of the weddings that we do that aren't in churches, so they're having a civil ceremony, it looks very smart, I think, a white phalaenopsis on a gentleman's dinner suit.
You had mentioned carnations. Now, that does have a stigma for us in the US, and we're seeing more use of it now. Obviously, it's used here much more widely, I think, than it is in the States. Does it have the same sort of stigma here?
Yes. I can say to a client, now tell me the flowers you don't like, and I've written the answer before they've answered. It's chrysanthemums and carnations. But then all of a sudden, because we get all these funky, bright, vivid, strong coloured carnations, and we use them in a very sculptural manner, they're accepted. And the textures are great, and I'll say to them, I can make you a sphere of roses, but you might as well make it a £50 note, because actually to do it from carnations costs a quarter of the price, and it looks better. A lot of the carnations we use have that intensity of colour, and they smell beautiful, which you don't get from roses. But it's quite funny, I do always say to clients, what don't you like? And I know it's the C word we refer to, carnations and chrysanthemums. And why? I mean, the trouble is, for years, our petrol stations, our garages and our corner shops have sold these horrible bunches that have 3 or 4 random stems of carnation in different colours. One's dead, a bit of dead gypsophilia, and a little bit of foliage in a bit of dusty cellophane, and that is people's perception of carnation. Yeah.
Well, we always say that it's the Queen's favourite flower, and if the Queen can like the carnation, so can everyone else.
I always refer to them as dianthus, their Latin name, in my estimates to clients, and then they don't know. But the trouble is, now they can Google, which is so annoying. Because if I tell them I'm going to do carnations, they're like, oh no. But if they come in and see a sample and they love it, and then I'll say, and that's a carnation, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I like those. Yeah.
We won't use the C word, no.
Yeah, it's our perception, isn't it? It's ridiculous.
It really is.
Yeah,
it
is ridiculous.
So funny.
We love gladiolas.
Yes.
Love them.
Dame Edna annoyed, she spoiled those for us though, didn't she? Dame Edna Everidge, that Barry Humphries character, throwing them around the place. And I still have a few clients who are allergic to gladioli. But in big arrangements, which we were talking about, they're perfect. And they give you a good colour range that we don't get from everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that green Woodstock, I think, is it? There's a fabulous citrusy green one. Green. Yeah, perfect. And then there's that strong pink, rather nasty peachy colour, but if you can't find that corally peach anywhere else, it's perfect.
There.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But they do have to be open. There's nothing more disappointing than these sort of giant spears of asparagus.
Touche. It does.
Simon, tell us a little bit about working with the venues in the UK, because we were talking yesterday actually about cakes, and it was definitely a different aspect than what we normally see in the States. Generally having a little bit more time working in the venues, is that something that's common? It
depends. If we're working in hotels, quite often we've got lots of time, but a lot of our events take place within our museums and our lovely, precious, cherished buildings like Hampton Court Palace, the Tower of London, many of those venues where when the visitors all leave at 6 o'clock in the evening, we then have half an hour, 3/4 of an hour to set up for a dinner. So at the Natural History Museum, for example, it might be a dinner for 350, 400 people. The guests will be arriving at 7:15, 7:30. You have less than an hour for the caterer, the florist, the lighting team, the production company, all to get their kit in. It's quite tight.
So Simon, basically it comes down to timing, because you have a caterer that's after the same amount of time that you are, the florist, the specialty linen company, the lighting company. Everybody wants in.
We all want the same door, the same lift. Yes,
exactly.
I mean, we're lucky 1 or 2 of the venues have several entrances that we can use, but it does depend, and we are always at the bottom of the pecking order, which makes sense in a way, because there's no point me standing there with my flowers if there's no table to put them on, no cloth. But then you're fighting the waiting staff, and why do the waiting staff always dump everything right in the middle of the table before they lay it on? Have you ever been to a party of that calibre where there isn't something gorgeous florally in the middle of the table? But every time, table number stand, pile of napkins, cutlery, I get so cross with them. But that's why they're waiting staff, bless them. They need to, got to do all this. Sorry, that's very unkind. I used to be a waiter.
We all
I learned. But the time pressure on working in venues is, and it just makes it a much more expensive job. I always feel so guilty for our clients because the labour charge becomes quite high.
Sure.
Because you need an enormous team to get the stuff in. And you also then have to plan what you're doing because it needs to be something that you can make off-site and take in. Whereas our gorgeous crystal candelabra we would normally arrange on-site.
Sure.
But we can't do that, we don't have the time, so therefore... Well, you can, sometimes you can park a van up nearby and make them in the back of the van and then carry them through, but you don't want to make your life too difficult if you can avoid it.
Right.
Simon, tell us a little bit more about the decor side. Obviously, floral is so integrated into that. Can you tell us about specialty linens and things that you might be doing, like acrylic and other elements that you're utilizing?
I am known throughout the sort of British industry as being rather bossy and interfering, and therefore I get involved in all of that. You will find some florists who are quite happy just to turn up and land their decoration on whoever's chosen some linen within the room, looking however it is. But I always think we charge a lot of money for what we do, so it's essential that therefore there's a cohesive look to everything. And I'm very bossy about lighting colours because we've agonised over the shade of rose we're using, and then if someone blasts a load of the wrong coloured gel lighting on it, it ruins it. It ruins the effect. So I get very involved, and certainly things like table linens, you have a much more beautiful range than ever we do. And it's very hard here. We have one or two companies that have very beautiful linens, but we've seen them for quite a long time now, and we do cry out for something different. And we have clients who will have things made, but it becomes quite costly. And we have, certainly if they have a small dinner, it's quite nice. You can then do those little extras, having linens and things made. But we do bring cloths over from the States from time to time. And we do a lot with things like perspex, acrylic as you call it, or lucite. I have a couple of American clients who always refer to it as lucite. We do quite a lot with that, but it's very short life and it's very expensive over here, acrylic. And the live edge, I love that. It's such a clever effect, isn't it? I mean, the world's a wonderful place when you can have that incredible effect just by, a box of cerise pink carnations on a sheet of live edge cerise lucite just looks $1 million. But it scratches so easily, and I scream at my boys that do all the clears, getting stuff out and getting stuff in, and lucite top tables that we have, and we have some wonderful tables that you can lift the top. They're made totally of clear perspex. Lift the top off and then we fill them with flower heads and then put the top back on and then do an arrangement. But you only get probably 4 or 5 uses out of them, and they cost hundreds and hundreds of pounds to make, so it is quite difficult.
Now I'm curious because you mentioned lighting a little bit, and for us for a long time lighting meant candles.
Yes.
And we're starting to see lighting effects used more in events. Is that fairly common here?
So Britain wins on lighting! Yay! Pin spotting is essential, which means you've got 1 or 2 beautiful lights that are focused into the centre of your arrangement, or if it's a tall decoration, you might have 2 at the base and then 1 at the top. And it's essential that that's a white light or a warm, gentle sort of candle lit. You don't want anything too sharp, you don't want anything too amber, or suddenly it looks all sepia-y and your whites have gone to brown. But pin spotting is gorgeous and makes such a difference. And then ambient lighting, uplighters, downlighters, and we now have these amazing LED banks that are intelligent lighting systems. So whereas it used to be that you put a pink gel on the uplighters and they stayed pink all night, now you can program it so that people walk in and the room's got a gorgeous colour wash in lilac-y, lavendery shades, but they might be a bit cold to sit in the room with that shade. So imperceptibly it changes, and over a few beats suddenly it's a pink warm glow. We avoid the greens because none of us want to glow green, but on the whole it's great. We have quite a sophisticated array of lighting these days, and it used to be that production was way down in the budgetary scheme compared to flowers, but I'm afraid production is up above it now and we're dead at the bottom.
So do you have some predictions of what might happen at the royal reception?
I think everything will be very understated. It will be very beautiful in a very simple way. You are looking at working in enormous spaces which are very decorative, very beautiful. So even if you walked in the cold light of day with nothing, they look amazing and are stunning, striking rooms. So I think it will be enhancing that and augmenting it rather than doing anything way over the top. The sort of work that we do for our events and parties takes place in rooms that people are so familiar with, hotel ballrooms that they've all been in 1,000,000 times, so we have to do something that makes it unique and special and different for their event. Whereas this is such a unique and special and different event anyway, happening in a very precious, extraordinary place, that it's just adding tiny touches rather than massive effects.
The elements here, venue-wise, so decorative from kind of what we're used to, really the four walls ballroom concept that we talk about a lot. Is that a challenge to work with some of the natural elements that are in some of these spaces?
It is, but quite often we want what you've got. We want the blank canvas, and so often, because so many of our events, we are quite limited in London on our hotel ballrooms, we're quite restricted on our venues for a sort of 400 level. So if you've got 450, 500 guests, there are only about 3 or 4 venues that we can work in, and therefore they are used an enormous amount. And we try always to make them different. So we are constantly recarpeting carpets, we are constantly hiding wall mirrors, we are hiding chandeliers, we are hiding stuff. And then you go into a real blank canvas of a room and you put in mirrors, chandeliers. It's bonkers.
That is so true.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you all want that blank canvas.
Yes, yes.
And yet you kind of replicate then the ballrooms that you would normally be in.
Yeah, yeah, you hide the walls with a pink drape because they had blue ones, and then you stick in some mirrors that are behind the drapes that you've just hidden.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it is, and that I find it frustrating, and it's always very hard. It's easy to talk the wives into it, but it's very hard to talk the husbands into it.
No,
and the trend for acrylic and all that perspex and stuff, clear chairs only work on a flat, clear, plain coloured carpet. You could live and die on our hotel carpets and no one would notice. They are so swirly and busy and patterned. So you have to carpet the ballroom before you start. And trying to explain to most men why you are spending £4,500–5,000 on recarpeting a carpet is quite a challenge.
We always say it's the Vegas carpet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much
carpets.
going on.
Yeah.
There's such bright colours.
Yeah, yeah, but they're durable.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the decor elements, we'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the pedestal arrangements.
Yeah.
And you're going to demonstrate how we begin to put those together.
Yeah, so shall we go and have a crack at it?
Thank you. Thanks. Simon, how do we begin the whole process of making a pedestal arrangement that we find most beautiful and so much fun to have at a wedding?
So I have a bucket, lots of cement, and into that I have set a piece of wood, piece of timber, sort of 2x2 square piece, something solid. You could use a scaffold pole. And then I've got 2-inch mesh of chicken wire, and it's most important that it's the 2-inch sized hole. And you make a big sort of scrunkly mess. We call these yetis. It's always known as a yeti. And you staple it in so that it is fairly secure. You don't want it so that it rotates on the pole. It needs to be quite secure. And if you're making a vase decoration, you can then also wire it down and anchor it to the rim of your urn so it's good and balanced and stable. Then we pack it in with some sphagnum moss around the side so that that actually is going nowhere and it's good and balanced. And then you create your decoration. First of all, you want to try and hide and camouflage some of your chicken wire. So we use things like trailing ivy, and depending on the time of the year, this is only going to last for sort of 20 hours, 24 hours, so you can do it the day before a wedding if it's in not too hot a venue. So what we tend to try and do is camouflage some of this, and we use foliage that we know doesn't need to be in water. So things like some ivy tucked into it, and that just starts to mask our frame. And then we could even use something like some moss just to tuck in, things like leather leaf, any sort of inexpensive, slightly dull foliage just to stuff in to give you a covering. Okay. And then we can start and build our decoration, and obviously we start using foliage first. So I've got some beautiful Solomon seal, which I love this time of the year. And then we have these rather clever things. They're actually sold as a grave vase. So you would put some flowers on it and then you'd stick it into the ground on your loved one's grave. I'm not so sure about that, but we use them a great deal and we call them tubes. I don't know why we call them tubes, because they're actually cones. But we have one of those into which we put some water. And you need to fill it sort of 2/3 full. And then you take a little handful of whatever it is you're using, tuck that in, and then you arrange those into there. So you'll see suddenly, so it's a little vase holding some water, and you can get a really big decoration from a relatively small structure. And the joy of it is as well, you can use things that hate to be in flower foam. So all those dodgy, scary things like blossom and magnolia and hydrangea that really don't like to be in foam are very happy in this because they're getting a lovely drink.
Sure.
Because of using the tubes,
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is something that's probably needing to be created on-site versus transported?
You can transport them upright if you've got big strong boys in a nice tall van, and what we'll often do is transport them 2/3, and then you add in your gorgeous lilies, any delphinium, things that could be delicate and might start to come adrift or get squished and squashed in the van on the way there. But you get a lovely soft, loose effect, and then things like our gorgeous euphorbia, which is just starting to come in. This lovely, slightly dodgy because it has a milky sap, so you always have to be careful. So let's imagine that's got some water in it for speed purposes. And then you can make yourself quite a pretty little bunch, spread things out so that they give maximum impact, and then add that into your decoration. And always you will need to work up the back as well so that you're keeping it balanced. It's great for an all-round decoration, but even if it's up against a wall, you want to make sure that it's balanced and secure. And then when it comes to putting in our flowers, things like roses, instead of putting them in singly, you use them in 3s, 5s. So just arrange those, strip off the lower leaves, and then in they go. Add those in. And you'll see that gradually you build up. And things like heads of hydrangea, which we know hate flower foam, loathe being in oasis, but they love this because they're in water all the time, and then you tuck those in. And little shorty things that you would never dream of being able to use in a vast decoration like this, you can use them. Tuck in a bit of foliage like eucalyptus we use a lot because it means it doesn't have to be in water.
So you can just put
I can whiz a bit of this in up the back here. Gosh, it smells yummy. Really love that smell of eucalyptus.
And for people who have seen these type of arrangements before, it's really interesting that you can look at this right now and see how it's taking shape.
Yes, I mean you know how it's going to work, and you also, the great thing is you don't need a mass of flowers. If you cover your Yeti with some inexpensive foliage, you could then do a very beautiful thing with 20 stems of lilies. And if you put some delphinium at the top, you think they're a metre tall, whacked on the top of that, suddenly you've doubled the size of your decoration. So it does mean every flower speaks. You get really good value from them.
Right.
The only thing is that it isn't something that you can maintain particularly easy for any length of time, because you would have to search through and top up each of those water-filled tubes, which is quite a fiddly task. Yeah, it's quite a challenge to find out where they are. And so on it goes really. I always tend to put one thing, I tend not to mix things within the tubes. But it's great things you imagine amaryllis, which is a bugger to get into. I mean, it's so difficult to get that into flower foam.
Right.
And often in chicken wire as well, if you're doing it in a vase, it always slices through. Whereas if you pop it in one of these, it's really and we quite often, if we're doing a lowish arrangement into oasis, we might add our amaryllis and things into the tubes so that they're able to get a good drink.
Interesting.
Just going to pop one in right at the top here so that you can see just how tall we can get our decoration to become. So we'll stuff those in. So you would just carry on adding in your flowers, and then obviously at the very end you add in all your most lovely things, and you just need to be aware that every time you put your tube in, if it's got water, it has to be in so that it's not going to... There's that fear when you want to have your low thing, so you have to choose something, tulips or something that will flop and flollop are lovely to tuck in there, because you still need your vase, your tube to be at an angle so that the water stays in it. And there, that is the rudiments of making a big statement decoration.
A pedestal arrangement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Large impact.
Yes.
And easy.
Awesome. Lovely.
And quick.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.